We light our chalice this morning to call us to remember our sixth and seventh principles, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all, and respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'm Reverend Amy Petrie Shaw. My pronouns are they, them, theirs, and we're gathered here today on land that is the traditional territory of the indigenous Iowa people. We open today with words from Reverend Elizabeth Gwen, because nationalism is here in our country and people on all sides of the political divide struggle with what is moral and ethical, and sometimes peace is hard to find. Elizabeth writes, "Spirit, I would rather not learn this. Didn't think I needed to. I thought someone else could do it. Thought a leader was coming to do it. Thought the young people could do it, or the elders could do it, or the professionals. Or I don't want to learn it because it means letting go of something I hold dear. Letting go of being someone who knows the answers. Letting go of being someone who doesn't know. Letting go of the way I see the world. Letting go of how I might have to change. Letting go of certainty, of logic, of facts, of control, of the myth that you can live on this earth and not harm, or the myth that I can't learn anything new. Help me to learn it, please. Then help me to live what I have learned and do right by the gift of being taught." We gather here today in community for exactly this, to learn and to live what we've learned and to do right by the gift of being taught. So come and let us learn here together.
Good morning. Welcome to the First Unitarian Church of Des Moines. I'm Bill Brock. My pronouns are he, him, and his. Thank you for joining us. We welcome all of you to our service, especially those of you who are searching for something more. More love, more joy, more freedom, more service, more learning. Whether it's your first time in service with us or your 100th time, we hope that you'll find here questions that stretch you, people to befriend you, and liberal religious values that challenge you to join us in loving radically, serving justly, and growing spiritually and emotionally. Our gathering song this morning is number 347, Gather the Spirit. For those at home, please keep your mics muted and simply sing along if you would like.
For our children's chapel time today, I'm talking to all the kids here and to the children following along at home. Today, everyone is going to talk about two words. We're going to talk about patriotism and nationalism. You may not have ever heard these words before, so let me tell you what they mean. They're not the same thing, even though they're close. They both have something to do with how much you love your country. But the feel is very, very different. Patriots love their country, but they see all the problems and all the mistakes. It's just like knowing that you love your family, but you also know that your sister tells terrible jokes and your dad steals your French fries. You love them, but you hope that you can help your sister to get over her jokes. And, well, your dad's never going to get over stealing your French fries, but you love them all the same. A patriot sees the problems with their country and they want to make it better. They want to make it the best country it possibly can be. Not in comparison to anybody else, not better than anybody else's country, but the best United States of America, or the best France, or the best Ukraine that it can possibly be. That's a patriot. A patriot can be any religion. A patriot can be any political party. They just love their country and they want it to be good. Nationalists think that they are the best. Nationalists think that it isn't so much about making their country the best it can be, but about recognizing that they must come first all the time. That's nationalism. Patriotism is when you love your own country best. Patriotism is when love of your own comes first. Nationalism is when hatred for everyone that isn't your own comes first. And that's really rough. As Unitarian Universalist, it's okay for us to be patriots. We can love our country. That doesn't mean we're going to go fight in wars, though some of us do. It just means we love our country and want it to be the best that it can be. But it would really be hard to be a nationalist and to be a UU fully. You might be able to do it, I don't know. But hating is not a UU value. So think about that this week and remember the difference between patriotism and nationalism. Thank you for listening to my words. Our offering words today are done in my normal, deeply serious tone, because giving should never hurt. A rich vacuum salesman was tired of his church asking him to pledge, and one day he got so tired of being asked for money that he drove to the pastor's house, and he burst in through the door. The pastor was a little surprised to see him, especially since he was dragging a beautiful top-of-the-line vacuum and a big, big bag. The pastor calmly looked up from his candlelight dinner and said, "Mr. Smith, what can I do for you?" "I've come to make you a deal," Smith said, and with that he opened the bag and he dumped a large, fresh pile of cow poo on the floor. Then he plugged the sweeper in. "The deal is this," said Mr. Smith, "my sweepers are so good that I'm going to turn it on and clean up the whole disgusting mess in under 7 minutes. If I can do that, you're going to promise to buy a sweeper from me and leave me alone about pledging." "Well, what if you can't do it?" the minister said with interest. "You don't have to worry about that," Smith sneered. "But if I can't do it in under 7 minutes from when we say deal, I'll pledge $10,000 this year. Do we have a deal?" "Deal," said the minister with a smile. The minister watched quietly for a long moment as Mr. Smith flipped the vacuum on. Nothing happened. He flipped it on again. Beginning to sweat, Smith flipped the switch back and forth. "I hope you have your checkbook handy," the minister said quietly. "The power's been out since yesterday." I don't open my doors to salespeople, so the morning offering will now be given and received. There will be a link in the chat. One half of our plate goes to our internal social justice work, and one half to our faith and action partners, Knock and Drop, and Just Voices. Thank you all so much for these gifts and for everything you do for your church. Our words for meditation this morning are called A Prayer for the World. For all who die in war, we lift up our hearts. For all who live in suffering in the aftermath of violence, we lift up our hearts. For all who give their lives in smoke and flame, we lift up our hearts. For all who go on in honor of the dead, we lift up our hearts. For all who have served, for our country and our world, for a planet that will find peace, for the young and the innocent, for the old and the wise, we lift up our hearts. For the weary and the war-torn, for those who would pray, for those too angry to cry, we lift up our hearts. For all of us, for the spirit of humanity, for the many names of God, we lift up our hearts. We lift up our hearts. Shanti, shalom, peace, salam, amen. Please join me in 1 minute of silence, meditation, or prayer. It's always wonderful to be here in the building together, because church is about community, and sometimes you just need to see one another. We're a community of human hands and human hearts. We come together to share our laughter and our tears, to be there for the good and the bad and the in-between. May we hold in our thoughts and prayers this week all of the wonderful folks who came to yesterday's Trans Lives Festival. It was amazing. We had children running and playing and being kids, knowing they were accepted here. We had adults having a marvelous time. It was wonderful. We hold in our thoughts and prayers as well all those in Ukraine suffering under the violence, and all of the everyday people in Russia who want nothing to do with this war. I'd like us to share together now the names of anyone we know who could use some special care and attention this week. You can type their names into the chat, or you can call them out loud, and may the love of this community hold them all. Bob and Carol Petrie. May the light of our community always shine on the broken places of the world. May the work of our hands and our hearts support and comfort all of those who hunger or thirst for food or water or justice or freedom. May we never look away when we're needed. May all those who are grieving be comforted, and those who are tired find rest. May the broken places be healed, and may those who are filled with joy and laughter be abundant. Now together, we're going to light 3 candles. We light one for the joys and sorrows shared here today, and one for any names that we've written or spoken, and one last candle for all of the joys and all of the sorrows which are deeply held, but remain unspoken or unwritten here today.
Our first reading today is by John Miltimore. It's entitled Orwell on the Difference Between Patriotism and Nationalism. A prominent intellectual at a recent private meeting was asked the difference between nationalism and patriotism. His response was similar to the explanation Justice Potter Stewart once offered on the difference between obscene speech, i.e. porn, and protected speech. I know it when I see it. George Orwell, in his essay, Notes on Nationalism, offered a much better answer. Nationalism is not to be confused with patriotism. Both words are normally used in so vague a way that any definition is liable to be challenged, but one must draw a distinction between them since 2 different and even opposing ideas are involved. By patriotism, I mean devotion to a particular place and a particular way of life, which one believes to be the best in the world, but has no wish to force on other people. Patriotism is of its nature defensive, both militarily and culturally. Nationalism, on the other hand, is inseparable from the desire for power. The abiding purpose of every nationalist is to secure more power and more prestige, not for himself, but for the nation or other unit in which he has chosen to sink his own individuality. It's a clear and simple distinction. Patriotism is primarily a feeling, Orwell implies, hence its defensive nature. Nationalism seeks something. It is desirous of power, prestige. Orwell notes that the World War II era nations of Germany and Japan are the most obvious and notorious examples of nationalism. However, in the essay, he complains more than once that the word nationalism fails to fully capture the meaning of the emotion he's attempting to describe. I am only using the word nationalism for lack of a better, he writes. He explains shortly thereafter what he means. A nationalist is one who thinks solely or mainly in terms of competitive prestige. He may be a positive or a negative nationalist. That is, he may use his mental energy either in boosting or in denigrating. But at any rate, his thoughts always turn on victories, defeats, triumphs, and humiliations. He sees history, especially contemporary history, as the endless rise and decline of great power units, and every event that happens seems to him a demonstration that his own side is on the upgrade and some hated rival is on the downgrade. Nationhood, Orwell makes clear, has nothing to do with nation states. At its heart is political fanaticism, or more acutely, deep-seated tribalism. The nationalist does not go on the principle of simply ganging up with the strongest side. On the contrary, having picked his side, he persuades himself that it is the strongest and is able to stick to his belief even when the facts are overwhelmingly against him. Nationalism is power hunger tempered by self-deception. Every nationalist is capable of the most flagrant dishonesty, but he is also, since he is conscious of serving something bigger than himself, unshakably certain of being right. Forgive me for saying so, but this last part seemed to hit rather close to home. By home, I mean modern America, and I'm not talking about the spike in usage of the phrase post-truth. The idea that modern Americans live in echo chambers is a concept so worn, one hesitates to use the phrase, lest they lose points for reciting a cliché. But that seems to be precisely the idea Orwell was getting at. In fact, according to Orwell's definition of the term, one could look at modern America and ask, are we all nationalists now? My hunch is that most people would answer, without a sense of irony, I'm not, but they are. And now we'll have the wonderful music of the Bell Avenue Ringers. Our second reading today is by Sudhanva D. Shetty. It's entitled, There's a World of Difference Between Patriotism and Nationalism. Nationalism and patriotism are two words which are often used interchangeably. This is incorrect, since there is a world of difference between the two concepts, in spite of a few shared ideals. While patriotism fundamentally means affection for one's country and willingness to defend it, nationalism is more extreme, unforgiving form of allegiance to one's country, as opposed to patriotism, which involves social conditioning and personal opinion. Nationalism involves national identity and the belief that one's nation and/or its government is supreme. George Orwell explained this contrast in his essay, Notes on Nationalism, which you heard a few minutes ago in our first reading. This is not to discount the impact of nationalism, though. Nationalism is a very strong instrument for uniting people, especially during wartime. The anti-colonialism struggles in Asia and Africa are an excellent example of this. In India, our freedom fighters, led by Mahatma Gandhi and Subhas Chandra Bose, used nationalism to unite the subcontinent's diverse demographics against British rule. However, while nationalism can unite people, it must be noted that it unites people against other people. It was nationalism, driven by religious identity and political misgivings, which caused the partition of India in 1947. It was nationalism which was central to Hitler's philosophy and which led the Japanese to invade China in 1937 and precipitate the Second World War. Nationalism focuses on the state, while patriotism focuses on the people. John Dwyer enunciated this difference when he wrote, "The patriot says, I love my country, works for its good, and defends it, if necessary, against enemies within and without. He strives and prays, not primarily that God will bless his country, but that his country will bless God." The nationalist, meanwhile, says, "My country is better than yours. My country is the greatest there has ever been, the greatest nation on God's green earth. They hate my country because it is so good." The Arab Spring of 2010 was buoyed by nationalism, catalyzed by a pan-Arab sentiment. Many political analysts feel that for peace in the region, the Middle Eastern countries need to embrace a national identity over a religious or tribal one. It is much easier to negotiate between nations which have a codified set of amendable laws, rather than between two religious entities inspired by unalterable and ambiguous religious laws. If history is any evidence, there is ample reason to believe that cultural and religious barriers are being weakened due to globalization and free market economics. This trend can be seen over time, particularly after the Industrial Revolution. After the ultra-nationalist movements during the World Wars, the fall of colonialism, the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989, and the rise of democratic governments around the world, we are connected to everyone else in the globe like never before. It is better to love our country, keeping in mind that democratic ideals are the most important. The term national identity is difficult to define. It can mean a religious identity, an ethnic identity, or even an ideological identity. The main shortcoming of nationalism lies in the fact that it can blind people. Love for one's country is imperative and necessary, but if this love becomes more important than constitutional values or democratic ideals, it is misplaced. Our centering song today is America the Beautiful. The words are in your order of service. There are things in this song that may feel uncomfortable today, calling for brotherhood without referencing women or non-binary people, calling on God in a secular patriotic song. But there are also beautiful images of the glory of our country. We sing it today to remind us that all of it, the good and the bad, are what make up our country. Please keep your mics muted and sing along at home if you would like.
Back in October or early November last year, we had a wonderful class here called Talking Across the Line. And the whole purpose of the class was because so many of us had folks that we loved and we wanted to have conversations with, but who were on the other side of political and social divides. It was a great class. We talked about strategies and ways to talk to people where our ideologies didn't match. Patriotism and nationalism fall squarely in those areas for so many of us. We may dearly love people whose ideas about these things don't match our own. As Unitarian Universalists, we are called to the democratic process by our principles. It means something to us, something theological. It's not an empty idea. And so all this conversation around what's a patriot and what's a nationalist matter. Now, I don't know if I have any Stephen Van Zandt fans in the room. Do I have any? Anybody who likes, okay, I got a few. Stephen Van Zandt song from a few years back. I'm a patriot and I love my country because my country is all I know. I want to be with my family, the people who understand me, because I've got nowhere else to go. I ain't no communist. I ain't no capitalist. I ain't no socialist. I ain't no imperialist. I ain't no Democrat. I ain't no Republican. I only know one party, and it's freedom, because I am a patriot. Bob Dylan rewrote the words of Samuel Johnson and said, patriotism is the last refuge to which a scoundrel clings. I quite like that one. Patriotism can be misused, we all know that. But a lot of times when it gets misused, it's nationalism wearing a patriotism costume. Stephen Decatur wrote, our country, in her intercourse with foreign nations, may she always be in the right, but right or wrong, our country. But G.K. Chesterton said, my country, right or wrong, is a thing no patriot would think of saying. It's like saying my mother, drunk or sober. Our principles don't include either patriotism or nationalism, but that call to a unified world, a responsible search for truth and meaning, and the support of democracy. And to live up to that, we have to understand these ideas, because when they go amiss, you're left with a nation that's not capable of democratic thought or process. As I said this morning during Children's Chapel, these two words have their ideas in the same place, the love of country. But the similarities really do end there. Nationalists think they're superior. Their country, their culture, their ethnicity, and their interest to them are so much more important than the interest of others. And they're afraid of people who don't share these ideas, or they devalue people who are different than them. White supremacists, Nazis, these are forms of nationalist. Unfortunately, our former president, Donald Trump, openly claimed he now identifies as a nationalist. That's challenging. Patriots are more encompassing in their love of country. We're large and we're diverse, so patriotism looks a bunch of ways. It has roots in freedom and our opportunities and in our boundless hope and generosity. Charles de Gaulle said, patriotism is when the love of your own country comes first. Nationalism when hate for people other than your own comes first. And that really rocked me the first time I heard it. Are you a patriot or are you a nationalist? Well, that depends. First, you have to decide how you feel about American exceptionalism. The idea that the United States has some kind of mission and character that separates it from other nations. And that's ingrained in everyday talk about American politics. It shapes high-level discussions about foreign policy. We still claim we play a unique role as the world's anchor of liberal ideas. It shapes conversation about domestic policy, too. It leads us to think that America's internal divisions and problems are somehow distinctive, and that by implication, other countries can't tell us much about how to handle them. This is white supremacy in another form. It's American supremacy. Are we really exceptional? Well, exceptionalism says we've got two things going on. We have a messianic mission to promote liberty and democracy. And two, we're called to colonize, to take control of things we didn't own and make them ours. You can see how well that is going in the Ukraine. Colonizing these days is a bad, bad idea. This wrong-headed emphasis on exceptionalism is unfortunate. It complicates the task of building a global coalition to actually defend freedom, to actually make democracy happen. We need that kind of coalition. Around the world, democracy is perceived to be in retreat. Russia is getting brave. China, a one-party state, will soon have the world's biggest economy. We need all the friends we can get. Exceptionalism also undermines the country's capacity to deal with one of the biggest problems of democratic governance. That's the problem of managing sharp internal divisions without resorting to methods that crush liberties and respect for minorities. Each of us needs all of us to make it through this world. As any history book will tell you, the United States has a lot of experience with the exceptionalism problem, but so do other countries. India deals with it on a much larger scale. There is an opportunity to learn across borders, but rhetoric about exceptionalism makes it less likely this will happen. We don't want to learn. In this century, the pursuit of traditional American ideals requires new ways of thinking. The ambition to advance freedom and democracy is broadly shared. So is experience in translating this into practice. To defend this, all of the countries of the world, all the democracies, have to pull together in common cause, our goal of one world. We have to adopt a new point of view, unexceptionalism. We want to acknowledge the commonalities and the differences in the American experience. But if we're not uniquely some kind of leader, well, what is our role? What are we supposed to be doing? Patriotism is something most of us heard about growing up, the Pledge of Allegiance. There aren't a lot of other countries that make children do that every day. I still get a lump in my throat and sometimes a tear in my eye when I hear the Star-Spangled Banner. I've been known to cry at the Budweiser Clydesdales. I love the United States. But in our country's current divisive political climate, we've lost the difference between patriotism and nationalism. Nationalists fly the US flag and claim it's theirs alone, that we're somehow not worthy of it. Patriotism is about seeing our flaws, being constructively critical, engaging in social justice. That's all part of patriotism. Nationalism is patriotism on steroids. It's idolatry, the worship of God and nation woven into the same fabric and unable to tell one from the other. Such a form of nationalism can be seen most fully when a pastor of a large evangelical church called anyone who criticized the US invasion of Iraq a traitor. That's nationalism. Patriotism calls us to something higher. We're not exceptional. We're not called out by some God. We're just us. Our nation and its founding was established with ideals of freedom and religion. We didn't get it right, not for a long, long time, and still not yet, but we're trying. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, a system of justice. We're getting closer to those things. I read the following statement: when patriots wave the flag, they're fully aware that it symbolizes and represents wonderful ideals, but not every decision and action our government makes. When nationalists wave the flag, it's to sanctify whatever America does. Patriotism takes pride in our history, but the focus is on the future. It works toward a nation's achievement of ideals. Nationalism looks to the past and says that everything we've done was right regardless of morality. There's a lovely piece, and I say that with all due irony, of German nationalist propaganda spoken by Hermann Göring, chief of the Nazi propaganda department. He said, the people can always be brought to the bidding of its leader, tell them they're being attacked and that they're in danger, then denounce the peacemakers for the lack of patriotism and for exposing the nation to danger. It works the same way in any nation, even a democracy. Sound familiar? Over the years, our politicians at times have become Chicken Little. We're being attacked, we're being invaded, we're in danger, the sky is falling. Fear for your lives, fear them, fear those, fear us, fear you. For me, I choose patriotism and truth over fear and lies. Each of you are called by your faith, by our polity, to live your values in the world. You're called to live responsibly. You're called not to make proud claims to false superiority. You're called to unexceptionalism. Sing America the Beautiful, but don't ignore our faults and our flaws. Be proud of our country and critique her every day. Do the intersectional work of justice and know that it is the purest form of patriotism. We are not alone, and that is absolutely beautiful. May every nation join together in one world dedicated to peace and justice and equity and beauty. But it's going to take human hands to do this work, and those hands are your hands. Those hands are Republican and Democrat and socialist and independent and green all together. Those hands are all of us. Not nationalists isolated behind a wall, but patriots proud of our country and determined to make her shine. Amen.
May we carry the light of love, equity, and justice into the world. May we honor the good work of all nations and fight against hatred wherever it appears. May we work tirelessly for a world at peace. Our final song today is "This Land Is Your Land." The words are in your order of service. Please keep your mics muted and sing along at home if you would like.
That ribbon of highway I saw above me, that endless
We always remember that this world was made to be shared together. Peace, ashe, and may it be so.